Welcome to the 15th class of FCE 207, Haiti, the most important country in the world, where we're going to end up with an actual lesson on Haiti. Up until now, we've just been talking about Saint-Domingue. We haven't even gotten to the name of the country. We haven't even gotten to true independence. We're going to get there today. My little prologue, I encourage you to take notes, try to make this learning experience as active as possible. That'll help you in your learning. This is a 200 level class, so I'm trying to keep it easy enough for a freshman. So at times I may simplify things, or it may seem that way. If you are an expert on Haitian history and you think I should know something more, or if I should have said something different, you tell me in the comments. I will legitimately change the way that I talk and think based on the expertise of others. Okay? So feel free to chip in. All right? Okay, let's get to today's class. Okay, continue to share. Students and friends, I am Professor Sky. My name is perhaps known to you. I've undertaken to teach about Haiti. I want curiosity and a thirst for complex understanding to reign in this class. I am working to help that happen. Unite yourself, students, and join with me for the same cause. I've actually changed this because I'm asking my students this, and I'm going to ask you that as well. Why weren't you born in Haiti? Why weren't you in Haiti in 2010? And why aren't you living in Haiti right now? Those are some questions I'm going to be asking my students to help them think perhaps a little bit more compassionately than they might be tended to do. And actually, a lot of people who watch my videos are from Haiti. So, hi, bonjour, ça va? The name of the class, if you're taking notes, is Dessalines Creates Haiti. That's kind of a provocative title, but I'm trying to do that. A couple episodes ago, a couple classes ago, I sort of simplified Dessalines as a little bit too simple. It's just like the bloodthirsty guy, and I got a lot of really good comments saying that I need to be more nuanced. So let's try for that. I started off my class today, and obviously I'm not going to do this with you, but a sort of a debate on whether or not Toussaint is an AWO, which is the Creole word for hero, or bandit, a villain. Bandit is actually a very complicated word in Haitian Creole. If you speak Haitian Creole, please tell me in the comments what I don't understand. As far as I can tell, bandit can mean a bandit, it can mean a criminal, it can mean a general bad guy, and it also means a gangster. Like when you watch news reports about the people who are controlling Port-au-Prince right now, the term that's used there is bandit. So I'm certainly not trying to say Toussaint is that. I'm trying to put forth a complex idea that even though Toussaint is one of the great heroes of world history, he had a lot of things about him that people see negatively. And I'm trying to create this sense of complex understanding. And the issue is the way the internet works, the way the world is, we want simple understanding. Good guy, bad guy. Haiti defies that at every single turn. So these are some of the points that I was hoping they'd bring up as far as him being a hero, buying his own freedom. He was a dedicated father, dedicated to his people, a cunning strategist, impeccable timing, tried to unify the three races that were there. He was respected by everyone. Like we're talking like France, we're talking Spain, we're talking England, we're talking the island, all three races on the country there. And he generally restrained from excessive force beyond, of course, being the father of the revolution that brought about freedom for everybody. I hope that should be clear. But of course, he also owned people, right? He didn't actually prioritize his children. He prioritized his country over his children. It is possible he was willing to sell out early on in the revolution, to just be one of the generals who just got amnesty and just went off as the rest of them went into chains, which the les grands blancs, the big whites refused. He couldn't outfox Leclerc, so he was not able, ultimately, even though he was a cunning strategist with great timing, he was not able to beat the French. It's not too surprising considering how many thousands of soldiers the French sent in, but still, he often alienated blacks. And he often was very deferential to the whites, allowing the whites to come back, allowing the whites to own property that they used to own as enslavers. He was driven by personal ambition, was at time tyrannical, and showed a fair amount of favoritism. So, tyrannical, like favoritism, meaning he gave his generals the best stuff, the best land, the best plots. Some see him as being purely a person of ambition. I think the reality is complex. He had draconian labor laws. What was great, one second, I gotta hit stop share here. I was so proud of my class because the first thing they talked about wasn't freedom. It was about the labor laws. Because that's what we've been learning with the work of Laurent Dubois and especially Jean Casimir, who really emphasize, and CLR James, everybody emphasizes that Toussaint truly believed the only way out was through sugar and large plantations, sugar and coffee and large plantations. He really thought that was the only way to keep his people free. So he insisted on those systems, which of course was a symbol of his own short-sightedness. He couldn't understand that the people who he was trying to serve would not go back into that kind of servitude, even if they were getting paid a little bit of money. His general favoritism of the military over the civil, meaning he was interested in building up the military, but maybe not so much the schools, the law courts, etc. And of course, he killed Moise. Because you're here, I'll go a little bit more into depth with how CLR James talks about the legacy of Toussaint. Toussaint's discipline was hard, but it was infinitely better than the old slavery. I think that's the best way to put his insistence on the labor codes. And then talking about Moise. To the blacks of the North, already angry at Toussaint's policy, watch the last class where I talk about Moise. The execution of Moise was the final disillusionment. They could not understand it. As was and is inevitable, they thought in terms of color. After Toussaint himself, Toussaint, his nephew, symbolized the revolution. He he would it was who had led the laborers against Eduville. He also had led the insurrection with extorted the authority from Rome to take over Spanish San Domingo. Oops. Hey. Moise had arrested Rome and later Vincent, and now Toussaint had shot him for taking the part of the blacks against the whites. So he shot Moise for attacking the whites. So that's where I tried to leave it, the complexity of Toussaint, this amazing figure in world history. And the question is, he's gone now. He's living in the Jura, eating some Comté cheese in the cold, damp cell. Now what? Now what's going to happen? That's the big question. So we're going to go back to Napoleon's to Napoleon's man here, Leclerc, his brother-in-law, who he sent to fix the issues. I call him Leclerc the Ger, which is a joke because it's Leclerc in English. Leclerc the Ger. It's not funny. As we study his fast descent into madness, hatred, and death. By all accounts, he was not a monstrous person at birth or even when he arrived in Saint-Domingue. He apparently believed in equality, was not particularly racist, and was not particularly fond of slavery. We're going to see what happens. Arresting Toussaint was probably a mistake. As James tells us, the news of Toussaint's arrest came like a cold shock to the whole population. Whatever he had done, he stood for liberty, and now he was gone. And here's my favorite question. Who was the most effective soldier for the revolutionary forces? Do you know who? There he is. Mosquito, the most effective. Général Moustique de la Fièvre Jaune. That's not a real name. That means in French, General Mosquito of the Yellow Fever. So they knew. Dessalines knew, Toussaint knew, Henri Christophe, everybody knew that when it starts raining, you get mosquitoes because mosquitoes breed in standing water. So when the rainy season comes, that's when we're going to get the mosquitoes. When the mosquitoes come, that's when the white people are going to start dying. The Europeans are going to start dying because the people who are already in the island are now essentially indigenous. I mean, not actually, because the indigenous people were wiped out or mostly wiped out by the European colonizers. But at this point, people who have lived there, Creoles, people who are from the island, are essentially immune. So we are seeing in the spring of 1802, it's coming back. The yellow fever kills the enemy. The poison is introduced by the mouth. The victim gets sick, worse, then dies. Not 100% of French is susceptible, but it kills 30 to 300 French soldiers a day, which that's a pretty good battle. If you are actually part of the rebel alliance, and you're going up against the French, that's a good day, and that's just the mosquitoes. Mike Duncan gives an example of a ship from Bordeaux where 40 of the 48 sailors died. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being on a ship and seeing that much death? And we'll eventually have a savage political assassination coming up soon. I want to give Mike Duncan, who is the basis of most of this class, his podcast, the Revolutions podcast, episodes 16 and 17. He came up with a way of describing yellow fever as three stages. You get sick, you get worse, and then you die. It's a vicious, vicious disease. So Leclerc had a plan. First he was going to try to disarm because you have to remember at this point, he's got Henri Christophe, he's got Dessalines, he's got Pétion, he's got the colored generals, the black generals, everybody's folded into France. Like he's doing pretty well, actually. Even though he's got these soldiers dying, things are going relatively well because everybody defected over to him, except for Toussaint. Even Toussaint defected before he got exiled. So in theory, this is working. So now it's time just to take the guns away. But again, one of the things that Toussaint did was he made sure there's a lot of guns for the people. He tries to fold the black and colored militia into his French army, his white French army, which is a great idea. Beautiful idea. That totally makes sense. Now we can have that mystical, gigantic force. Except, of course, the French continue to be stupid enough to believe in the inherent inequality of races. They actually believe in the inferiority of non-white people. That is how benighted and ridiculous and silly and stupid they are. That they actually believe that human beings can be divided by race in terms of capability and intelligence. But don't worry, they're going to pay for it. They're going to die. Hard way to learn. I'm not sure they did. So, the soldiers would be treated less well. But, this would have been okay. So we have unhappy soldiers because, you'd have a general and he's going to be just bumped down to captain and captain might be bumped down to private, right? Just everyone's just, oh, you can't possibly be as smart. You've been fighting for 12 effing years. You've been on the front lines fighting for your life and for your freedom for over a decade. But you're not as capable as this bumbling white guy who managed to not die of yellow fever. In a letter, this is quoted in James, Leclerc sends back to Napoleon, do not think of establishing slavery here for some time. He knows what would happen. He knows it's a bad idea. Huh. So this is the law of May 20th, 1802. This is where Napoleon officially declares that the Treaty of Amiens, nope, we're just going to go back to slavery. And this is the mistake that's going to cost him Saint-Domingue. This is the mistake that's going to cost him probably Louisiana, and basically the rest of America. This decision to try to rush back to some form of slavery, to reinstill it, is going to be one of the great catastrophes that he could possibly commit. If you can read French there, you can read some details. Now, Martinique was already enslaved because they had been taken over by England. If you've been following this class, there was a whole thing of like, if England knocks out France, they'll just institute slavery. So England had knocked out France and Martinique so that when the law of February was passed that freed the slaves, it didn't happen there. And Guadeloupe, they reversed it and tried to reinstill slavery. And eventually, of course, the blacks and the formerly enslaved people of Saint-Domingue are going to find out. Now, they happen to find out, according to legend, like a bunch of Guadeloupean prisoners jumped off their boat in Le Cap and just swam to shore and told everybody what was happening, but they were going to find out. And this is it. This is it. You can't go back. Like you just cannot go back from here. You have thousands of battle trained in multiple strategies, like old West African strategies of guerrilla warfare and French strategies and Spanish strategies. Some of them have some English strategies. You have them fighting for 12 years for one cause, to be free, to not be enslaved. And now you tell them that even though you are fighting for the people who are trying to put you back in chains. How can you possibly expect to win? Oh, Mr. Great Genius of History. Oh, great man that you are. Leclerc, sorry, I just found this hockey card once. I thought it was very funny. Leclerc asked for two contradictory things of Napoleon over and over again. Send me more soldiers so I can win the fight, please, and get me out of here. He just wanted to leave, and if he was going to stay, he needed way more soldiers. And we start to see how he starts falling apart. He starts losing his mind. He starts seeing only hatred and death everywhere. And I'm going to read you some of the quotes from a letter that he sent back to his brother-in-law. For if my position has turned from good to critical is not just because of the yellow fever, but as well the premature reestablishment of slavery in Guadeloupe and the newspapers and letters that from France that speak of nothing but slavery. Translation: You done messed up, Aaron. You made a mistake. Your mistake. I am paying for your mistake. Here's my opinion on this country. We must destroy all the blacks in the mountains, men and women. Again, the blacks in the mountains refers to many of the forces that were never under any other banner, that were never European at all, were never aligned with the French or the British or the Spanish, but just who lived in the mountains. Many of them were like not even first generation. They were directly from Africa. Maybe they'd been enslaved just a few years just before 1791 when all of the uprising started. So they just were much more independent. And in Leclerc's opinion, Leclerc, who by most accounts was a fairly reasonable person before he showed up on the shores of Saint-Domingue, men and women, and spare only the children under 12 years of age. That's how you know he means it, folks. If he just says kill them all, he might not mean it. If he says kill them all except for these people, that means he really means to kill those other people. We must destroy half of those in the plains and must not leave a single colored person in the colony who has worn an epaulet. You see, Napoleon's got epaulets. You see, epaulets are things you wear on your shoulder to indicate that you have some kind of rank, meaning every single person who's ever held any rank for any army at any point during the last 11, 12 years must be destroyed, which means murdered. It seems to me that you do not have a clear view of my permission, of my position. I'd like to translate that for you. You don't know what is going on, dumbass. You don't know what's happening. You are messing it all up. I don't care if you're the best general there's ever been. I don't care if you're so powerful. I don't care. According to a movie, your sexual attraction to horses, I don't know what that was about. But whatever it is, you are wrong. I am right. Stop messing up, citizen. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying in this message. Of course, he can't say it like that because he doesn't want to be executed. So he just says, it seems to me you do not have a clear view of my position. It seems to me you don't know what the hell you're doing. The generals would turn on the French and often and unexpectedly anyway. What does that mean? That means we'd have black generals who are fighting underneath Leclerc on behalf of First Consul, on behalf of the Republic of France. And in the middle of the fight, while they're shooting, full on Order 66 style, would just turn their guns and shoot at the white generals and just join the rebellion. Because why not? Why are they fighting so hard to enslave themselves? Of course, this is going to happen. It seems to me you do not have a clear view of my position. Show me the proof, dumbass. This is where he says famously, there's nothing left but terror. And we need to remember that the term terror has a specific meaning. That's what we called it in 1793 when in France they started killing each other because some of them were too extreme, some of them were not extreme enough, and some of them were just too damn moderate. They were cutting each other's heads off, blood was running in the streets, and now he's saying there's nothing but terror here. So after losing his mind on October 1803, November 2nd, 1803, a great political assassin takes down Leclerc. and he's dead. Died within a week. Which might have been a good thing, except his second in charge is Rochambeau, who's one of the great villains of this whole story. I barely even talked about him. He's been in and out. He was here because he was supposed to go to Martinique, but that didn't work. He was here for, but you've seen Rochambeau, but now he's in charge. And he loves the idea of terror. And he's going to be the face of terror. He's going to be such an effective, racist son of a bitch that he is going to unite all of the vast rebel forces in Saint-Domingue against him. Much like Galbaud was a bumbling racist who ended up being so bad at his job that he created the circumstances that led to emancipation, Rochambeau is going to create the circumstances that lead to complete independence from France. What happened in San Domingo after Leclerc's death is one of those pages in history which every schoolboy should learn and most certainly will learn someday. I love the way CLR James writes. That's what I'm trying to do with this class. Maybe you're like me and you are a schoolboy who did not learn this, or schoolgirl or school envy. I don't know what kind of school, whatever you are, but whatever it is, here we are, we're learning. Here's some images of what it was like back then. You have on the left a French officer killing uh, drowning a black man in the water. They would often just tie sacks of flour to their legs and drown them in the ocean. They would poison their ships. They would just do mass killings. And then, of course, there'd be reprisals, which you see on the right. You see some black generals hanging white soldiers. They would crucify. They would do all sorts of horrible things. There would be 4,000 dead in October and November. And the faithful officers, the black officers who were faithful to France, got killed the quickest because they were nearby and because there was the fear that they were just spies. They were just going to turn at any point because who wouldn't turn against a force that is trying to enslave you? And this is not mentioned. I don't know. I felt like this needs to be emphasized too, that the coloreds are also in a very tough spot. Even though they might not be in danger of being immediately thrown into chains, they, as it says here, in July 1803, they've already been banned from going back to Paris, going back to France. They have to get special papers to get permission to go back. And if you remember, people like Rigaud, the goldsmith, people like Pétion, people like Villatte, these great warriors, these great generals, a lot of them are educated in France. A lot of them had no idea that they would ever be treated as less than a white person until 1763, until the third class. Okay, until 12 classes ago, the colored inhabitants of Saint-Domingue did not really know racism in the way that we think of it, at least not systemic, at least not structural, at least not prejudicial, which makes sense. If we read this quote, while waiting for this authorization, Rochambeau began his own count to exterminate the mulattoes. That's the term he uses for coloreds. Both terms are outdated today. They outnumbered the whites, and looking forward to restoration of white supremacy, he thought as well to get rid of many as possible. He hated the mulattoes more than the blacks. I asked my students why, and some of them said, well, because they, anyways, I think the reason why is that the intelligence and abilities, white supremacists are so stupid. They actually believe that there is some supremacy in whiteness. They do. I don't know. Some people think the earth is flat. Frankly, there's more evidence that the earth is flat. It's not. But they actually believe it. So the existence of the coloreds and the fact that they would go to France, they would get an education, and they would be every bit as capable and intelligent as their white counterparts. Like the success of a mixed race person is evidence that it's not the whiteness of their skin or the lightness of their skin, it is the access that the lightness of their skin grants them. So it is to undermine everything that a racist believes in. So that's why I think Rochambeau hated them. And of course, there's also the concepts of racial purity and all that. Bunk. His most famous atrocity was getting some dogs who had been trained to chase after fugitive enslaved people and bringing them to the island. Now, Mike Duncan goes to great effort to say that there's a chance that this only happened one time. There's only one person who was attacked by one dog. I mean, that's a lot, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is the myth, even if it, which might have been true, that there were many dogs sicked on many people. The inhumanity of it, the cruelty of it, the it's just unbelievable. And it's part of this increasing spiral of violence. So Rochambeau, he was pro-slavery, he was pro-terror, and he was apparently a sadist. I think he liked hurting people. And he is so terrible that he would help to unite the rebellion. In a way, he was working for Dessalines. I'm just going to include this quote from when Dessalines abandoned the revolution in 1802 when he went over to the French, because I think this shows the kind of guy that Dessalines is. Take courage, I tell you, take courage. The whites from France cannot hold out against us here in Saint-Domingue. They will fight well at first, but soon they will fall sick and die like flies. We know they're going to die like flies because of the mosquito. What's that line from Arrested Development? They're dropping like flies, and I need them to fly like bees. Oh, it doesn't matter. Listen well. If Dessalines surrenders to them 100 times, he will betray them 100 times. I repeat it, take courage, and you will see that when the French are reduced to small, small numbers, we will harass them and beat them. We will burn the harvest and take to the hills. They will be forced to leave, and I will make you independent. There will be no more whites among us. That's his promise. They will fall sick and die. If I betray you 100 times, I am betraying them 100 times. And this image from the time shows the different ways that Toussaint and Dessalines are perceived of. On the one hand, you have the reasonable person with the paper and like the little like kind of is that like a French flag behind him, and his sword is down, and he appears to be based on sort of statesmanship. And on the other side, you have someone with their head cut off and just a floating hand there. Again, this is oversimplifying. In the next class, I will talk about the idea of Dessalines as being a somewhat religious-like figure. So there were four groups that needed to be unified. That's the thing. There were four groups, and they were all unified ultimately under Dessalines, despite the fact that none of them particularly liked him. Okay? The Black Army and generals had been competing with him for Toussaint's approval, competing with him for land. They sometimes saw him as too severe, as too power hungry. They weren't a big fan of his. The Colored Army and generals hated him because he's been fighting against them for years and years and years and years. The War of the Knives. Remember, he was the guy who laid siege and all those people died, you know? He's been fighting them for a long time. And just up until like right now, he had been serving underneath the French, tracking down guerrilla groups, these groups of black soldiers, many of them who came straight from Africa, who were not born on the island, who lived in the woods, who lived in the jungle, who lived in the trees, who lived in the mountains, who were just totally independent, not underneath any flag. He was often charged with tracking them down and killing them on behalf of the French. So they don't like him either. And then just the people themselves, Dessalines was often like the hand of Toussaint, the one who was doing the hardest work and the most vicious reprisals. So in a way, the best way to unite somebody is to have somebody that nobody really, that is nobody's champion, because he becomes everybody's champion. This is the moment in Arquet where the Haitian flag is created. Now, back in my home, I have the Haitian flag. I really should have it here, but I forgot. This is a great symbolic moment of Dessalines creating the Haitian flag, just like he will officially create the nation, May 18th, 1803. We have Dessalines, Catherine Flon, who's actually stitching together, and we can see it on the Haitian money. The blue represents the black people, right? The formerly enslaved. The red represents the coloreds, those of mixed race, and the white represents the whites. Oh, isn't that nice? So he's just like Toussaint. He's trying to find the unity between the three of them. Except he takes the flag and he tears out the white part. He's making it clear there is no future for Haiti, which there's no future for at this point Saint-Domingue, which can include the presence of white people, because time and time again, you have shown us, you have shown Saint-Domingue what you intend to do. You may be nice, you may seem friendly, you may help our cause, but at a certain point, you are going to put out a decree that puts everybody back in chains. So we're not going to listen to you or anybody who looks like you ever, ever, ever again. This is going to have some consequences, which we will see in the next class. But to get back to this moment, he unites the resistance, and then back in Europe, oh my God, England rejoins the war, which means now Napoleon is totally distracted. He's looking somewhere else. He doesn't even know what's going on here. He had this whole beautiful plan, They're going to show up and promise peace to Toussaint. That's a lie. Tell the officers that they'll get to keep their power if they can just turn in Toussaint. That's a lie. And then he's planning on eliminating all the other officers. That's the truth. That's what he was planning on doing. And then he could take over the Gulf of Mexico. And that way we don't have to worry. Is it the Gulf of America? Is it the Gulf of Mexico? No, it could have been the Gulf of France. It could have been the Gulf of Napoleon. And you have all these happy slave plantations making money for France. And then Louisiana, with the Louisiana territory that France now had, thanks to some secret deals with the Spaniards, there's a lot of good land there. So you can grow land there and you can feed the enslaved people, and you can start to have an entire uh, hemisphere that can be under French control. You can take out the English. You can take out the English speakers. You can have basically a whole new France. But he said, forget it. It wasn't worth it anymore. This wasn't going to work. This wasn't going to work. He could see that Saint-Domingue was lost. And once he realized that Saint-Domingue was lost, then what's the point of keeping the rest of it? That was going to be the moneymaker. That was going to be the most important part. It was too difficult. There's too much disease. There's too much resistance. He's out of here. He's not coming back. Who defeated Napoleon? It wasn't Toussaint. It wasn't Dessalines. It wasn't anybody whose name I have said this entire class. It was the people of Saint-Domingue, the enslaved people of Saint-Domingue, who figured out how to organize and coordinate and fight with less than nothing. And over the span of 12 to 13 years, figured out a way to kick out the most powerful country in the world and the most powerful and brilliant leader in the world, and all the forces of all these different competing interests, all these colonial powers. They were defeated by a bunch of men and women whose names we will never know, whose names they didn't even get to keep. So they had actual names that were taken away from them, and they were given new names, and we don't know either of those names. But they fought for freedom in a way that is more meaningful than any other freedom fighter that I can think of. My great, 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 great grandfather's name was Michael Jackson, not that one. He fought at the Battle of Bunker Hill in Boston. Bully for me. I'm a revolutionary. That's nothing. That's nothing. He was a well-to-do English guy who wanted to fight for the concept of America. He wasn't brought over here on a ship in the size of a shoebox and fighting off disease and sickness and being whipped every single day of his life until he eventually figured out how to get out and then fight against the most powerful forces in the world while having virtually nothing to do it. That's what defeated Napoleon. So if you tell me this is not the most important story for human beings to know, then you tell me what's more important than that. What's more important than a bunch of people whose names you will never know, the most forgotten people in history, rose up and fought the most powerful people, the most famous person in the world who's not named Jesus or Hitler, probably more famous than Hitler, actually. Napoleon, he's underrated now because Hitler's so notorious now, but Napoleon is defeated by a bunch of nameless first, second, and Africans. That's it. That's who. That's who did it. So he sold he sold Louisiana to Thomas Jefferson. And if you live in America and you speak English, I guess you can thank them too. You doubled the size of our country, and that is a huge part of the expansion of the United States of America. Apologies to all the people who live there already, who we, of course, displaced and murdered. Sorry, my daughter uses the term lit all the time. I find it annoying, but it amuses my students. So we're here at the end of France. Rochambeau, November 18th, 1803 is when he finally surrenders. He'd been losing for months. You know, there's a thing. There's a thing where they really annoyed the Americans. So they paid them with debt. Like they paid them the French debt, which is worth like nothing. They didn't think to bring enough money. Like basically they went to war thinking they would be able to like make sugar and the whole thing would pay for itself. It didn't pay for itself. Leclerc and Rochambeau, they're all dreadfully poor and they're hoping for America to help them out. So they're kind of alienating America. So America doesn't really help them out as much as they can. And then all of a sudden, all these ports start flipping. They only have like two ports in the entire island. So you have like tens of thousands of French soldiers and they're all kind of stuck there. What can they possibly do? They can't get food. They're being frozen out. So what do they have left to eat? What do the white French invaders have to eat? They're eating the dogs. That's who eats the dogs. The French soldiers who should have known better than to try to take over this land that had been fought for 10 years. They lost the town of Jérémie. They lost Leclerc, the last straws at the Battle of Vertières, and of course, Rochambeau surrenders to the British because he can't surrender. He can't surrender to Dessalines, or at least he shouldn't. Vertières is the great culminating battle of this war. There's huge losses on both sides. It's represented many different times. November 18th, 1803. Those are the sculptures. Someday I hope to go to Haiti. I really do. Seems like it's pretty difficult right now with there's some collapsing infrastructure that's particularly pronounced. But this is one place I hope to go to see the place where Haiti officially won its independence. January 1st, 1804, they celebrated their independence. That was the day. This is the Declaration of Independence. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it was written and spoken by Dessalines. A couple elements to notice. They called themselves the Indigenous Army. Of course, the Taino were the indigenous, but now they are the indigenous, right? Now they are. They weren't the original, but they are now. This is their land. They are the indigenous army, not the invading army. Liberty or death, following a French slogan as well, obviously. And right there, we finally have, for the first time, actual Haiti. The term, every time I've used Haiti up until now, it has been anachronistic, which is a term that means not appropriate for the time. Okay, like if I said that Thomas Jefferson said that's lit, that's anachronistic because Thomas Jefferson didn't use Generation Z slang from 2025. Okay, so it's always been Saint-Domingue, and now it's called Haiti, which was a word that they chose from the Taino. From the Taino. Remember the second class where I talked about the Taino? So the people of Haiti, who are the new indigenous members, take the name and instead of honoring Saint Domingo that the Spaniards wanted to recognize, instead of calling it something European, they're not even calling it something African. They're essentially jumping over all the slavery, all the European colonization, and renaming it after something that is tied in to the origins of the land. We'll talk more about the Declaration of Liberty It is not enough to have forced out of your country the barbarians who have ensanguined it for the space of 2 centuries. It is not sufficient to have put an end to the factions reviving from the phantom of liberty which France exposed to our eyes. It is necessary by the last act of national authority to ensure the everlasting liberty of the country which gave us birth. We must convince the inhuman government which has hitherto kept us in the most humiliating state that all hopes of ever enslaving us are at an end. We must live independent or die, independence or death. Let those sacred words rally us. Let them be the signal of battle and our reunion. Let us begin with the French. Let them shudders in accosting our coasts. If it is not on the account of the cruelties they have exercised, let it be by the terrible resolution we have entered into putting to death whoever is born French and who would soil with their sacrilegious foot the territory of liberty. Uh-oh, we're going to get into some pretty violent times ahead. Okay, peace to our neighbors, but annihilation to the French name, eternal hatred to France. That's our cry. So next class, we'll get into Dessalines, to the liquidation of the white population, and we're going to start moving on to how Haiti's actually going to figure out how to be a post-revolutionary state. All right, hope you enjoyed this class. I love teaching it. It's important. All right, there's the camera.